Hello, chat. Welcome back to the Level 1 News. Things have taken a strange turn this last week, but we are finally back to March. And today we're doing government and security news.
The time gap is definitely going to be a little bit more apparent this week because clearly a lot of these stories are from the time before.
Last week.
Yeah.
What do you call, what's the opposite of antebellum?
Probellum? I don't know. Postbellum? I don't know.
Some Latin speaker can correct us in the chat. But yeah, especially our first story. So we'll start out with government news, and this one really doesn't matter anymore, does it?
No.
Things have pretty much progressed far beyond this ever meaning anything.
Yeah. Yahoo News has the headline from The Independent, which is in the UK, that UK is ready to launch retaliatory cyber attacks on Russia, the defense secretary tells MP. So I suppose those are underway.
Yeah. I mean, I think every country at this point has threatened this, and it's probably already happening.
But this is a great lead-in because, pro tip, important thing to understand, if you're going to get ransomwared, now is not the time to be ransomwared. Because guess what? Your cyber insurance provider, they're not going to pay. They're not going to pay because even if it's like a criminal gang operating out of Mexico, they're going to say that it has something to do with the war, and they're not going to pay your cyber insurance claims. You're not going to get your crypto keys. So I fully expect ransomware to just really take off. Not necessarily related to the other thing, just opportunistically.
Yeah. Well, I think most of the focus from them is not going to be on ransomware. It's going to be on more destructive attacks.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you do find yourself in the next months, weeks, years, getting ransomware, your cyber insurance is not going to pay anything.
Also, cybersecurity, the cost for that, and some of those services are nonsense. They're not going to help you, but if there are some reputable ones, expect those prices to go up.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be busy.
Got to read the fine print. It's like, oh, acts of war are excluded from my insurance policy, and it's like, guess what? Everything is now.
And the government section is very small this week. Not a lot of government news other than the obvious. And just a couple of updates, though. This one is a disappointing one.
Waymo is going to be able to keep its robotaxi safety details secret, a court has ruled. So we reported on this when it first sort of entered the public debate, and Waymo fought really hard for this, and they were able to convince the judge that, hey, this data is proprietary, we don't want to scare anybody. It was probably an argument along the lines of, well, our safety record's not perfect, but look how much worse a meat bag driver is. Meat bag drivers, the safety record is worse, but people will hyperfixate on our not perfect safety record.
But their argument wasn't even that. Their argument was, we can't show you how we avoid obstacles and stay out of accidents without betraying the secrets that we want to keep secret, because only we know how to avoid accidents this good. But the public good must be considered there, right?
Yeah.
Because we're saying that it's better to allow traffic fatalities than to hurt Google's bottom line.
Do you think there's a holographic banana problem in there? It's like where
there's a banana sticker on a bumper or something, and
yeah, it's like if a pedestrian was wearing a holographic shirt, it's like, oh, that's a street sign, and
it just runs them over.
Yeah.
Or a red hat.
Yeah.
So the other disappointing thing about that, just a reminder, is that the DMV wasn't fighting. They weren't advocating for free information. They went back to Google and they were like, listen, legally, we have to give this unless you sue us and put a restraining order on us. Please do that today. And Google did.
Wow.
More blowback, though, from bad government policies. We learned last week that the IRS was taking a step back, probably a baby step, from facial recognition. So they're going to do this instead.
The IRS to adopt Login.gov as a user authentication tool. And hey, it looks like 18F is doing it because of the headline banner thingy. It's like they're trying really hard. They're the ones that were doing such a good job. Accenture and some other people sued them to stop doing such a good job.
And this is a spicy one. I would never have included this in the story list unless if this is the New York Times. The liberal mecca saying it and not me saying it.
The New York Times headline is, the C.D.C. isn't publishing large portions of the data that it collects on the other global situation, the original global situation.
I'm tired of living through a historical event.
This one's so done. We're so done with this one now. Obviously, because now the New York Times is printing the truth about it.
We've always known this, though.
But they're admitting that, and if you read, you got to read. That's so much doublespeak here. But they're admitting we didn't give you the data because once we looked at the data, we were afraid that people would interpret it in a way that we don't like. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. There's literally a quote in here that's like, "Oh, it's much better for you not to have the data because you're so stupid than to have our annotated data to tell you how to interpret it." That's the argument.
The wastewater analysis was deeply disturbing.
I feel like there's no way that it's never not disturbing.
Is it disturbing because they have all the information, or is it disturbing because they're keeping it secret?
It was disturbing
Yes.
because the wastewater, it was like, oh, I remember saying, why aren't we looking at the wastewater during this time to know what to do? And it turns out we were.
The whole time. Not everywhere, but certainly it would have been valuable for us to look at that. There were several scientists who weighed in on this, and they're like, well, we were desperate for data. We've been begging. Why would they not do this? And then they would just trot out that same old argument. You're too stupid. You're too stupid to see the data.
There's not a Star Trek episode that has this situation, so I don't know what to do.
It should be on a t-shirt.
Clearly, we're going to have to resurrect Gene Roddenberry and introduce him to modern problems.
He wakes up and he just starts screaming and doesn't stop. What have you guys done since I've been dead?
Well, the EU has been bleeding all the big tech companies for fines because they're horrible and they're in violation of almost every privacy rule that is created. But they keep finding new ways that they're horrible, which is amazing.
New EU antitrust frontier emerges for Microsoft and Google. Spam ads. This is kind of convoluted, but this has to do with
There's a chart.
with Google and Microsoft sort of fighting for one another for the best ads, but then they sort of agree not to take the bad ads, which then end up in smaller channels. So
I thought there was a chart, but I'm thinking of a different story. But yeah, basically, what were some of these companies? Like DuckDuckGo, for example. DuckDuckGo, I'm sorry to break your heart here, uses Bing.
Rip.
They buy Bing's search services, and part of that agreement, when you partner up with Bing and Google and you sign that, contract made of human flesh with your blood, one of the things they say is, we get to decide what ads we kick down to you, and you have to show them at a certain place on your page. Well, they give you the absolute most embarrassing ads. I'm sure it's like mail enhancements, spyware, NFT scams and stuff like that. And so the argument here is you are hurting my website by forcing me to put scam ads on my website. Makes sense, right?
it does.
And another update, Apple continues to stand strong, although it doesn't really hurt that bad, right?
This is not a repeat from last week, the week before, one before that, or the one before that.
It's kind of like the giant apple is standing there, and there's a tiny, tiny baby turtle just headbutting its shin or its ankle, but it doesn't really register.
Apple racks up its fifth $5.7 million fine as the Dutch consumer watchdog digs in. Apple is still to pay the last 4 fines, according to the report.
Which imore.com, these paywall alternative websites are getting kind of crazy, I'll admit, but they assumed that the reason they didn't pay the fine yet is because it's just more convenient to pay it all at once, and they know there's going to be more, which there probably will. The Dutch are serious about their dating apps.
Can Level 1 go independent and then as a nation fine Apple and just send them an invoice? Is that can we do that? We can all retire.
Only if we join NATO.
I mean, at this point, would you be afraid not to?
Well, the condemnation of what's going on in Ukraine is pretty universal. Not very many countries are on the side of Putin, but one big one, one big exception, China, the People's Republic. And as we know, China has a very strict control of their media. The problem is, it's hard to coordinate that, right? You're going to have slip-ups.
Chinese media accidentally posts the CCP rules on the Russia-Ukraine coverage and hints at a Taiwan takeover. Read the exact quote.
It was a pretty big hint.
It's very disturbing.
It's from a pretty major editor, I think, for Beijing News, maybe.
They referred to it as the Ukraine problem or the Ukraine situation.
No, the Taiwan problem.
Oh, yeah, the Taiwan problem.
It was,
oh, yeah, here we go. Here's the break the deadlock.
Hugh Zijin, former editor of the state-run Global Times, described Russia's recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk regions as a measure to break the deadlock of the crisis in a way that showed Russia's strategic determination.
No, there's another quote.
Well, they were in the middle of, the Chinese television was in the middle of doing that when Putin just sort of Leroy Jenkins and decided to do a lot more than that, and then they were like, "Wait, what? Oh."
But I can't find the quote. But basically,
There's a few articles of this too. This isn't the only source, but yeah.
Yeah, they were saying that, we're going to be in this situation soon. And we have to back up Russia because that would look very hypocritical if we start crossing the South China Sea after we've condemned what's happened in Ukraine.
And also, we will need Russia support with Taiwan. It's like, why would China need Russians?
Well, because they got to buy energy and sell all of their stuff, right?
Taiwan is a beautiful place, and it's a very unique on planet Earth. It needs to. It's a global treasure. It must be preserved.
That's
Things
what Putin
getting
says-
weird.
That's what Putin says about Ukraine.
I mean, isn't Ukraine the breadbasket of Europe? I heard that. I don't know if it's true.
The media is playing up every positive thing they can about Ukraine, but I
Right.
do think there's a lot of fertile land.
Yeah, I think it's an agricultural haven.
Slightly worried about the radiation sensors going off around Chernobyl.
Yeah. By the time they watch this, they might have more information than we do about what's going on.
That's a strategic move that's like 4D chess, but it's only 4D chess in like the Warhammer style where you care nothing for your troops.
Right.
Like how are you, if you're right now bivouacked at Chernobyl, what's going through your head? It can't be pro-Putin.
Radioactive ions is what's going through your head.
Radiation. Well, this is a reverse from a story that we hear constantly because every week there's a new story about China and Russia hacking somebody. And we're so used to it, I don't even add most of them anymore because it's always the same story. There's no details. But very rarely do those two entities blame somebody else. Maybe that's changing.
Chinese cybersecurity company Doxes' apparent NSA hacking operation. A Chinese security firm released a detailed report about what it says is malware created by the Equation Group, a hacking group widely believed to be the NSA. This has a lot of really interesting details.
And it's been around for a long time, since 2013. Wow. And they are just now bringing it out, which seems like this was more of a press release.
Yeah.
Now, they didn't know for sure that it was the NSA until the other leaks. And then they were able to compare the stuff in those leaks with what actually happened to them, and they said, that's NSA.
Here it is.
Or
there was
maybe
a
not.
comment in the code that was like, this is the NSA. Remove this comment before deploying.
And another one that is a little stale. Didn't quite hang on after the expiration date.
Cyberattack hits Ukrainian banks and government websites just before they lost power.
And right after, or just before the rockets. So that's unfortunate. And, of course, again, the lockstep. One does it, the other supports it because they know that they're going to be doing it.
Chinese hackers linked a months-long attack on Taiwanese financial sector. This is the Apt 10 group.
And it's funny because they did something brilliant here. They did credential stuffing. So like they were just hammering dictionary attacks against trying to log in with lower level accounts. Turns out that was a total ruse. They actually got into a couple of those accounts and they actually stole some money. They stole like 80 grand. None of that was real. They didn't care about that 80 grand at all. That was a cover up for the exfiltration of data that was happening behind the scenes there.
Mm.
It's getting crazy out there in the
Why is our router sending so much data? Oh, it's the credential stuffing attack.
Exactly,
You're wrong.
they just got a little bit of money. It's fine. And it wasn't fine.
No.
And it wasn't fine for quite a while, too. You know what else isn't fine? The NFT world. Because, my God, do these people get phished constantly. If you own NFTs, why would you ever click on anything in an email?
Why would you own an NFT?
$1.7 million in NFTs stolen in apparent phishing attack on OpenSea users. That's what, about 3 apes?
I think they're dropping in value, aren't they? Oh, you know what? I don't have any interest in the NFT world. I wonder if they fell with crypto during the invasion.
I don't know. No.
Probably. I think everything fell for a while.
So these people called out to OpenSea and they were like, hey, you got to undo these transactions. But OpenSea looked into it. It turns out that this was a clever way of kind of blank checking the contract. So the phishing link made you sign a contract that was not completely filled out. And then the attacker filled in the rest of the details with zeros and took your NFT. It's such a dangerous world. And stalkerware. We've looked at some terrible, terrible things that have come from people using that, but it's still used everywhere. There are so many different ones, and it turns out they're all the same, and they're all terribly flawed.
Behind the stalkerware network, spilling private phone data of hundreds of thousands. A fleet of spyware apps use the same security flaw.
So it's supposed to be spying, but it's also spying on the spy. And these companies, all these different apps, all the same company.
Spying all the way down.
It's 1byte. 1byte runs them all, but it runs them all these separate ones. And these are all shell companies all the way down here.
We should not install apps on our phone.
In fact, you don't install this app on your phone. Someone does it against your will. This is spyware.
I thought that this was also one of those companies was a library provider. Not this story, but we had another story where somebody had written a library to provide good geolocation services, and it rolled in something like this if you incorporated that.
No, this one was, I think, on purpose.
These were dedicated apps, yeah, in this article. But I thought I had seen one of those company names before about being a provider for a component for other apps.
Maybe we should just all have dump phones again. It's
Or,
the only way.
You know, Google and Apple have the money to give us auditability of the apps that we're running. They really do. They just choose not to.
But that would cost them so much money.
Yeah.
And they like money.
We would see the horrors, the Lovecraftian horrors. That's what they're afraid of. Yeah, probably.
I feel like most people wouldn't even care most of the time. They'd just be like, whatever.
Well, another small update, and we've already updated this story, but it's funny because he just keeps doubling down. No one will ever admit any truth about this. It is so disgusting.
It's the Missouri governor's office. Brian Krebs says that it turns out that the governor's office is responsible for the teacher data leak. So this is the very same one where they went after the newspaper reporter, but Brian Krebs and some others kept digging, and they found that this problem went back the better part of a decade and was kind of a known issue internally, and they never really fixed it properly. 2 years before this became a known issue, the governor's office took over all things information technology, and they were charged with fixing the system.
They did not.
They did not.
And when that was uncovered, a decade later, rather than admit that they didn't fix the system, they tried to scapegoat the guy. Wow.
And also, I think we said that is like the guy was like, that's an awfully specific number of $200 million. You think that's what they already got a quote on vendors for fixing it?
But we talked about that when it happened.
Yeah.
There is no way it would cost that.
Yeah.
We could do it. We'll take that contract for $1 million today, right now, and we'll have it done in 6 months. We can have it done in 3 months. Microsoft has a little bit of an issue, and it's one that you probably would never know that's failing until it was too late.
Microsoft confirms that Windows wiping tool leaves user data on the disk. Big security flaw for those wishing to clean a PC and pass it on. It just marks it as free space. It doesn't actually delete it.
You never want to leave anything behind after you wipe.
That's right. It's good advice.
Good life lesson. It applies to more than hard disks.
The article wasn't really super clear if SSDs were affected, because SSDs should be affected differently than mechanical hard drives.
Well, 3G is done. We're getting rid of it. Unfortunately, there are still devices out there that can only use 3G, and most of them are antiquated, but some of them protect you from criminals.
Ending 3G service sparks fears of an alarmaggedon, because a lot of people's alarm systems that are wireless only connect on 3G.
Wireless is the one you want. I watched a video on YouTube one time from a guy who was doing time in prison for being a very prolific burglar. And he said if he saw wireless alarms, he didn't mess with it at all because it's too hard to defeat that. There's easier pickings elsewhere. So what I took from that is go on eBay or somewhere. I'm sure you can buy them. Get those little stickers.
Yeah, and just put them
all
out.
over your house.
I wish they had those stickers in Project Zomboid. Because I feel like every time I go to break into a house to like get a weapon or something, it sets off an alarm.
The alarms are brutal, but you can actually use the alarms to your advantage.
Yeah, I guess open a door and then run away and let them all
And then
congregate
loot
there.
the surrounding houses.
Yeah.
Pro Zomboid tips. The game came out in 2011.
Yeah, it's like 10 years old.
Well, we had another bank leak, and this one is juicier than the usual bank leaks because it's from Swiss bank, and they are super, super secret. They actually have secrecy laws in their country. And it turns out that's the reason for this. A whistleblower, if you want to call him that, says that they believe that those laws are corrupt, and this data will prove it.
Revealed, Credit Suisse leaks unmask criminals, fraudsters, and corrupt politicians. Massive leak reveals secret owners of £80 billion held in Swiss bank. Now, this is a really interesting article. You should read it. It covers a lot of really interesting stuff. But this week, we have kind of a theme of these, not just in the government section, but also in the business section. And it's a secrecy for me, but not for thee kind of thing. So
it's a who's who of horrible people. And the Guardian really goes into them and really digs them all up. And, yeah, a lot of horror in there and a lot of money probably being exfiltrated from certain places where it should not be. So that's interesting if you want to go peruse that data. I wouldn't recommend downloading it to your personal disk, maybe into a VM.
now, law enforcement is definitely going to go after those fabulously wealthy people, right? I mean,
Oh, they always do.
aren't we going after people that forgot to report $600?
Or people that sent $50 to a trucker.
Foreshadowing.
This one was absolutely astonishing. I believe that these people were particularly susceptible to it because they were marketers.
I don't understand how this happens. But
You know, it's not the brightest bulbs here.
yeah.
But boy, did they get taken for a ride.
Job fish to the con that tricked dozens into working for a fake design agency.
What kills me about this story is that some of these people were like, well, I was working there for 6 months and I hadn't been paid. And I'm like, whoa. You weren't working there if you're not getting paid. After the first 2-week period, and they were like, no pay, I'd been like, okay, I'm out.
So this lady caught on to it. She was the first to figure something out. And then she brought this young lady on board. And then they started digging deeper, and it began to unravel. They point out that, they just went online. This guy is just a model from Getty Images. This guy is a beehive maker.
What a weird...
And they repurposed them and put them in as their people. The guru, which is this guy, was really amazing at faking this incredible persona of marketing. For example, this is him right here. That's not real. There's the real picture of the
That was
magazine.
something they had on their website or something to advertise about how big they were. We've had ads in these big magazines.
So the scam was, for the first 6 months, because people were desperate for jobs during the lockdown, and you could do this remotely. And for the first 6 months, you didn't get a salary, but you'd get commission from any job that you brought in. And these people were killing themselves trying to bring in jobs. But here's the thing: you couldn't bring in a job because it wasn't real. So they just worked forever without getting paid, taking on debt. Again, not brilliant people, but
I just don't get that. I guess, is that common, in Silicon Valley, where it's you just don't work and you get equity in the company?
I don't think so.
I don't understand. In what world does that ever make sense where it's we'll pay you eventually?
The only world where that makes sense is if the stock is actually worth something that you can sell to eat.
Right.
So it's we'll give you 1,000 shares, and it's all right, I'm going to sell 10 shares a month, and you could live on that. Then okay, maybe.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me.
This company wasn't even publicly traded.
No.
Yeah, that's
didn't
the only
exist.
thing I could think of that was maybe that makes sense, but this doesn't even count for that company.
What I can't figure out is how he benefited directly from that.
He was probably planning the whole fake it till you make it thing. He was probably planning
Maybe
to,
just an egomaniac.
So
Yeah.
eventually they would get a contract and start advertising, and then it would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many people that, wander in on the forum and elsewhere where it's I have this really amazing idea. I'm going to pitch it to large company X, and it's oh, sweet summer child, they do not care.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Here's a headline that should shock no one. I mean, come on. Do we really need to say this? Of course.
Linux developers' patch security holds faster than anyone else, says Google Project Zero. That's because Linux developers don't do anything but work on Linux.
And they have a personal investment in it.
Yeah.
They're just not just being slaved by these other people for their own benefit. That's pretty obvious.
Linux is a lifestyle. It's not a job.
You joke, but...
Yeah, it is kind of.
Well, Clearview AI, if you'll recall, let's think about the timeline of Clearview AI. They came out and they said, look what we can do. And it was very impressive. And people were like, wait a minute, how are you doing that? And they said, don't worry about that. And people started to look into it. And they're like, you're breaking all kinds of laws doing this.
It required a little bit of human sacrifice. Just a little bit.
A little goat's blood.
Just some blood magic. Some light blood magic. But nothing really came from that. And they continued to do it. And now they have the biggest facial recognition database in the world, maybe outside of China. And they're not being apologetic or saying they're doing anything different. In fact, they're going to expand.
Facial recognition firm Clearview AI tells its investors that it's seeking a massive expansion beyond law enforcement. They said that they're going to be able to identify billions of people with the rate at which their database is expanding, which is either investor fluff, like they're misleading investors to try to get money because they're about to go under, or they haven't slowed down at all, even in the face of multiple governments saying, wait a minute, what are you doing?
But those same governments are reaching around and putting money in their back pocket.
Yeah.
So they point out that the government contracts are what's fueling this massive. They claim that they have 14 photos per person on Earth. Now, they don't have every person, but they have more photos for some people, which still bounces out to an average of 14. So they have 7 times 14 billion photos. Wow.
Some of those are going to be us from this YouTube channel.
Not only is it's going to be you, yeah, because they are looking to add this to so many new things. And a lot of the tech giants seem to be on board with it. So more and more of your daily life is going to require it. I mean, look what the IRS did.
Yeah. Look what future employers are going to do. They're just going to feed your face into a machine and it's like, vacation video, extreme skateboarding, whatever. And people are going to feel like they have to curate this elaborate online existence that bears no reality.
You're saying that like it's the future. That's just Facebook, right?
Yeah.
That's Instagram, that's Twitter, that's everywhere. YouTube?
Is it like cheap cosplay or free cosplay? I love that guy because he does stuff like that. But it's like, here's my yacht, and it's very obvious that he's just using like forced perspective and like a cutout from a magazine article, or he's doing cosplay with like a mop and some other stuff. It's really funny.
I've never heard that guy speak. I don't know anything about his social media, but his stuff pops up all over the internet.
There was an article, for some reason, Google News wants me to see Subway stories about the Subway. I don't know why they think I love Subway, because I never go there, but there's a guy... And he's a famous TikToker who only TikToks about Subway and works at Subway. I think he works at Subway not to make money, but to make TikToks.
I think I might know who that is because there's a guy on YouTube. Is it the YouTube guy who's literally just like him talking about making sandwiches?
I don't know.
There's another guy like that.
The one that they made this news article about. You know, it's these. I think it's AI generated. They find a controversial TikTok or tweet or something, and they're like, "Oh, that's got a lot of hits. Write a story about that." And it's just a story about the post. But the post was how he gets angry when people order a dozen cookies because then he has to cook new cookies. I don't understand why that's entertaining either.
I wonder what happened to the Sherwin-Williams guy. There was a Sherwin-Williams paint mixer guy, and they fired him because they didn't like the attention that he was attracting. And it's like, are you dumb? Yeah.
I think Subway's just fine with this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they're not doing great, right?
Wasn't the last story we heard about them not having real tuna?
That, you know what? That went to 2 different, like, appeals courts. I don't know how that shook out. Different labs said different things. It was crazy. Magspunch.com. I don't know what that is. This is a paywall alternative, and surprisingly enough, the mainstream media, we weren't too keen on this one. Didn't report it a bunch, but it's real. You can actually go and look at the map.
Google Maps location data of the Freedom Convoy donors has been posted online. So if you gave them money, they know where you're from. And again, this is you got to click the link there.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
So, you know, when we're always talking about your data is going to, like the Clearview apparatus is going to be used against you, whether you like it or not, and you think, I don't, like as Krista said, most people don't care, and it's like, and then there's that, and it's like, should we be outing
Probably
people?
should care a little bit.
And you might be thinking, well, I would never do that because that was terrorism, and I would never support terrorism. That's fair enough. What about the people who donated to Zelensky?
Well, I don't think we had a story about this because, it's rapidly developing, but before the invasion happened, on Google Maps, you could see there was a traffic jam at the border on the Russian side. And you could see that in real time. And it was like 3 a.m. People were like, that's probably invasion forces. And it turned out to be true.
Which means nobody told the invaders not to bring their phones.
Yeah, do you think that it's just full of like 20-year-old recruits like TikToking in there?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, wow.
But not only governments of the world, also companies, because your company has a vested interest in making sure you don't do certain things.
Krista, you say that, like, what do you think war is? It's just like 18
Let's stand
to
around and
25
wait.
years old
Yeah.
dying.
Or 18 to 60.
It's grim over there right now.
The Ukraine Defense Forces definitely got some gray beards in there. They're not spring chickens. And, were you leading this? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I disrupted that.
That's all good.
Right. If you're going to, fight against the power, it's a problem if you have a tracking device that power controls in your pocket.
Apple retail employees are reportedly using Android phones and encrypted chats to keep unionization plans a secret. Now, what does that tell you about how Apple conducts business internally? What does that tell you?
It tells me there's going to be a guy standing at the employee entrance checking your purse, and your pockets.
Yeah. What's this, an Android?
I mean, it's got to be a simple SQL query, right? Who has an apple.com email address that has green chat bubbles? Like,
Oh, the color of your chat becomes much more dire when you work for Apple.
Ugh. And a final warning to those of you who are trying to defeat the methods being used to let some of us play games. Don't do it. Although maybe we should just let you do it because you're really messing things up.
Sorry, a tool to unlock Nvidia's Ethereum mining limiter delivers malware. You can lift the light hash rate mining limitation, but the light hash rate mining limitation really didn't matter. You could do other things with it. It's fine.
But it's not fine if you install that because I don't think it's like active malware. It's just setting you up. They believe it's meant to be a botnet later.
You've got malware.
And you don't have any Ethereum for your efforts.
All right, we will see you guys tomorrow.
I would like to say that it gets better, but it doesn't.
No.
Business news and what else?
It's a dark week. Business and probably social.
All right, we'll see you then. Bye.